I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
I don't know if you remember, but after the vice presidential debate this last go around with JD Vance and Tim Walz, we did the show the next day, and I said, I don't think I've ever been more proud of a candidate for national office as a Republican than I was of JD Vance's performance. It was a seminal moment. I think if you look at the polls, it was part of the turnaround that sort of squashed any hope that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz had of winning the White House. JD Vance was magnificent, and he continues to grow. He's just an ordinary guy, but he knows his stuff. And he announced last week that his very first interview after being inaugurated as the vice president would be with Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation. And I thought to myself, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you rewarding CBS News, this organization that hates you, hates Trump, hates Republicans, hates me for voting Republican? Why are you awarding them this really exclusive first interview post-inauguration? And then the interview happened, and then I got it. He didn't go on there to reward them. He didn't go on there to give them some gift. He went on there to own them, to destroy them, to shut them up, if possible. Margaret Brennan is the host of Face the Nation, and she was quite sure that she was going to dominate JD Vance. She was wrong. We've got a lot of clips to go through, so let's do it.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted.
Good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted. And many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country. And I think most Americans agree with me.
I don't really care, Margaret, is going to become my new catchphrase, I think. Or maybe I'll use it around the house when my wife wants me to do something. Her name is not Margaret, but I think she'll get the point. What a boss move that was. As, again, Margaret Brennan trying to fact check in real time. Well, you know, no one really knows whether that person was radicalized in Afghanistan.
Was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country. By the way, there's another great reveal there from Margaret Brennan where she says, well, you know, all these people have been vetted. 30,000 Afghans, they're here for refugee status. They've been vetted. And JD Vance has to remind her that there was a terrorist plot that was upended with arrests made in Oklahoma that was supposed to be a big terror attack on Election Day. People forget this stuff, right? It was just a couple of months ago. It's a huge deal, right? Margaret Brennan either forgot about that, and her job is to know the news, or she just wrote it off and thought it was unimportant. Well, you know, but the most important tell, I think, in that entire thing was when she kept interrupting JD Vance saying, oh, no, these people have been vetted. These people have been vetted. These people have been vetted. And that's not true. That's not accurate. The accurate statement from a news person and professional journalist would be the Biden administration claims these people have been vetted. And of course, JD Vance had to point out the fruits of that vetting. That was the terror plot that was discovered out of Oklahoma. All right, we're just getting started. This is a great exchange as well, but I really like the smug look on Margaret Brennan's face where she thinks she's got this gotcha moment with JD Vance. Just take a look at, watch her face.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by...
country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
That is so good. We are a nation founded by immigrants, and that doesn't mean we need to be stupid about immigration. But once again, watch her face. What's going on with her?
Oh, well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by...
country.
This is a very unique.
That's just freaking me out. And seriously, this stuff of nightmares. And the fact that JD Vance could just sit there calmly and just deliver facts. He won this exchange on facts. By the way, notice the words I use. He won the exchange, almost like it's a debate, not an interview, a debate. And Margaret Brennan, with her pad of paper, you notice he doesn't have any notes. He doesn't have any cards. He's just got his brain. He just responds to everything. She's got her whole pad of information there in her cheat sheet, plus a producer talking in her ear. And her goal was to defeat and destroy JD Vance. And as I said, it didn't really work out well, did it? All right. More of the smug face. Now, this one has to do with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. They use this all the time, actually. JD Vance is a recent convert to the Catholic Church. Certain leadership in the Catholic Church have voiced concern over immigrants in this country. Just to be clear, as a Catholic, it is not doctrine or dogma, and every Catholic must not agree with everything that the bishops and the magisterium tell us about immigrants. In fact, in our catechism, it specifically says that countries have a right to have their own borders and enforce their laws. But that's not the point here. The point here is that Margaret Brennan tries to trap JD Vance as a Catholic on immigration policy. Do you remember any journalist at all ever doing that to Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or any left-wing liberal proclaimed Catholic over abortion? The answer is no. Don't even try to look it up. For that, they're happy with them being Catholics who are completely against the doctrine and dogma of their faith. But here with immigration, well, you need to answer to the Lord.
Let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people. Yeah. Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk about
going
people like Laken Riley
churches
who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe.
Yeah, and if those violent criminals are in a church or a school, then yes, law enforcement should take care of them. One of the, again, masterful, and I'm the last person who should give any suggestions to JD Vance, but as a Catholic and as a fellow Catholic, I would also love for him to say, and by the way, Margaret, even if the church in Rome dictated a policy that was contrary to what was right for the American people or constitutionally correct for the United States of America, my obligation as vice president is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and what the American people need. Otherwise, I would step down from office if it conflicted with my faith and with the Catholic Church. But by trotting this out here, you are bringing up some of the worst kind of bigotry against Catholics that have held sway in America, sadly, since our founding. There's a reason why we've had so few Catholics elected to high office, because there's this myth that we will have an allegiance to the pontiff in Rome rather than to the Constitution of the American people. And what you're doing is a soft kind of anti-Catholic bigotry, and I resent it. See, he should have done that because it's nice to play their cards against them, because that is, by the way, exactly what that was. Well, you have this policy and you're Catholic and the bishops say it should be this. So now what are you going to do? And it plays into this myth that suddenly Catholics who hold elected office have to do whatever Rome says, which is, bigoted. All right, more Margaret Brennan, JD Vance. It's just a treasure trove. It was so glorious, this interview.
Things you experience at the grocery store, or what people touch and feel. That's what you were talking about, bacon on the campaign trail.
Of course, of course.
Those things, when do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives?
Can I just pause it there for a minute? So we're this was recorded 5 days after Inauguration Day. 5 days. And Margaret Brennan is complaining about the fact that bacon and eggs and milk prices haven't come down yet. Now, they spent the last 4 years pretending like the prices weren't going up. And if they were going up, it was transitory. And if they stayed up, well, it was your imagination. And then if the price didn't go up as much as it did in the summer of 2022. They pretended like the prices were going down. Hey, inflation is down, everybody. No, the prices are still going up. They're just not going up as much as they were. No, inflation is down. Or they would say, we have the strongest economy on the planet. So you'd say, well, I can't afford groceries, but we have the strongest economy on the planet. And you're like, for whom? And they're like, it doesn't matter because Biden said we have the strongest economy on the planet. So they did that for 4 years. We're now 5 days in. Hey, my bacon, my eggs, but not to mention the fact that we have a swine flu, or not swine flu, that would be pigs, avian flu outbreak that's driving up cost of eggs. It has nothing to do with government policy and economic policy. But it's amazing how suddenly they've all found religion on inflation and on prices. When do people get lower prices, JD? When? And by the way, as unfair and despicable as the hypocrisy is in that question from Margaret Brennan and CBS News, JD Vance still handled it perfectly. Do you want to watch him handle it perfectly? I bet you do. Here it is.
In their lives.
Well, Margaret, how does bacon get to the grocery store? It comes on trucks that are fueled by diesel fuel. If the diesel is way too expensive, the bacon's going to become more expensive. How do we grow the bacon? Our farmers need energy to produce it. So if we lower energy prices, we are going to see lower prices for consumers. And that is what we're trying to fight for.
All right. And now the next moment in this JD Vance gotcha session, interview from Margaret Brennan. This one, of course, has to do with the January 6th pardons. And, well, JD Vance handles it like a man.
2 weeks ago, you were on Fox News and you said, if you protested peacefully on January 6th and had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. Did you counsel the president against these blanket pardons for 1,500 people?
Well, Margaret,
All right, so now you see the way the question is framed. You said this and the president did that. So is he just ignoring you? Are you fighting? Do you have any influence? Did you say anything to him? Or are you just, what's the point? Are you going to quit? Are you going to, it's not about eliciting information. It's not about helping the American voter and get them more informed. No, it's a gotcha. It's about, and again, Vance nails it.
Including those who committed violence.
Margaret, I noticed that you cut off the thing that I said immediately after that. The full quote is that, of course, there are gray areas. And here's the nature of the gray area. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice denied constitutional protections in the prosecutions. There were double standards in how sentences were applied to the J6 protesters versus other groups. What the president said consistently on the campaign is that he was going to look at a case-by-case basis, and that's exactly what we did. We looked at 1,600 cases, and the thing that came out of it, Margaret, is that there was a massive denial of due process of liberty, and a lot of people were denied their constitutional rights. The president believes that. I believe that, and I think he made the right decision.
Daniel Rodriguez used an electroshock weapon against a policeman who was dragged out of the defensive line by plunging it into the officer's neck. He was imprisoned, sentenced to 12 years, 7 months. He got a pardon. Ronald Maccabee hit a cop while wearing reinforced brass knuckle gloves, and he held one down on the ground as other rioters assailed the officer for over 20 seconds, causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating, there's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly. And then what did Merrick Garland's Department of Justice do in unjustly prosecuting well over 1,000 Americans in a way that was politically motivated?
Is violence like that against a police officer ever justified?
Violence against a police officer is not justified, but that doesn't mean that you should have Merrick Garland's weaponized Department of Justice expose you to incredibly unfair process, to denial of constitutional rights, and frankly, to a double standard that was not applied to many people, including, of course, the Black Lives Matter rioters who killed over 24 people and never had the weight of a weaponized Department of Justice come against them. The pardon power is not just for people who are angels or people who are perfect. And of course, we love our law enforcement and want people to be peaceful with everybody, but especially with our good cops. That's a separate issue from what Merrick Garland's Department of Justice did. We rectified a wrong, and I stand by it.
Well done. Well, good God, he's so good. And the infantile line of questioning here. I swear, I feel like we learned this, and maybe this is the school system. I'm a little older than Margaret Brennan. Things may have changed quickly there at some point, but I feel like I learned this in 5th grade in basic social studies at Farrand Elementary School in Plymouth, Michigan. But where we learned about our system of justice, which means that even if you're a bad guy and you break the law, that doesn't mean the police and the judge and the court system can treat you unfairly and violate your rights. And if they do violate your rights, you go free. And it was determined by the chief law enforcement officer in this country, the President of the United States, that Merrick Garland and Joe Biden did, in fact, violate the rights, even of people who did bad things. If we're able to grandstand and say, well, is violence against police officer ever justified? Ask Al Sharpton that question. Ask Al Sharpton that question. Ask Rashida Tlaib that question. Ask Cory Booker that question. Love to see what their answer is. Ask oh God, what's her name? The crazy woman in Los Angeles. No justice, no peace. Get in the face of all the Trump people.
Maxine Waters.
Maxine Waters. Thank you, Kevin, for the rescue. Ask Maxine Waters that question. Or Gavin Newsom, for that matter. The double standard in hypocrisy is gross and disgusting. All right. So that's the January 6th aspect. Oh, here we go. More of JD Vance's brilliance against Margaret Brennan.
The Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The Review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden, the fugitive who stole U.S. secrets, to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count. Does any of this give you pause putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the American people do.
Him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance. Here's Tulsi Gabbard.
I'm going to let him finish here because he's got great stuff to say about Tulsi Gabbard, but I do love that. Obviously, you know, Town Hall and all of the websites at Town Hall that I work for don't fall into this category. But National Review and Wall Street Journal opposed Trump. And she's like, eventually they supported him. Oh, so they opposed him all through his presidency, all through the last campaign, all through this campaign. And then at the end, given the choice between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they eventually supported him. So clearly, Donald Trump should do whatever National Review and Wall Street Journal tell him to do. Really, Margaret? And by the way, I know people like Margaret Brennan. I know the people over at CBS News. They make fun of the Wall Street Journal. They make fun of National Review. They think that they're stupid, but they only use them as a weapon. Well, National Review said this, and you know, it's 1984 all over again right now. I shouldn't say 84 because that's George. It makes you think I'm talking about George Orwell. I mean the Reagan 80s. You know, and so they're the only game in town. They're the only conservative paper out there. Yeah, it's not that way anymore. There are a lot of influential conservative voices. To hear JD Vance to say, yeah, they don't really have much relevance anymore because they've gotten it wrong so often. And they forget the people. They forget the people who actually buy their subscriptions and read it. Look at the circulation of those. I don't know Wall Street Journals, but I did see National Review's circulation the other day. Not pretty, not good. But you can trust Town Hall, by the way. Town Hall, Hot Air, Red State, PJ Media, Twitchy, all of our sites. All right, let's get back to this.
Well, the Senate will provide advice and consent as is its constitutional obligation, but I feel confident that Tulsi Gabbard will ultimately get through. Two things that are important to know about Tulsi. First of all, she's a career military servant who's had a classification at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades. She has impeccable character, impeccable record of service. And she also is a person who I think is going to bring some trust back to the intelligence services. The bureaucrats at our intelligence services have gotten completely out of control. They've been part of the weaponization of our political system, the weaponization of our justice system. We need to have good intelligence services who keep us safe, but part of that is restoring trust in those services, and we think Tulsi is the right person to do it. That's why the president
trust those intelligence services.
She recognizes the bureaucrats have gotten out of control, and we need somebody there who's going to rein them in and return those services to their core mission of identifying information that's going to keep us safe.
That was a weird thing for her to say there. It's like, well, she doesn't trust the intelligence services. Good. The director of national intelligence shouldn't have a lot of trust. He should constantly be challenging the intelligence services. By the way, At this point, after everything that's happened over the last 20 years, who does have faith in our intelligence community? My favorite tweet that somebody put out there, I think it was from John Levine, the reporter at the New York Post, where somebody at the CIA in an article was saying, well, John Ratcliffe coming in here and changing things the way he has as the new CIA director, we didn't really expect this. And John Levine said, you're a spy. Isn't that kind of your job? Say, we didn't see this coming. That's the problem. You're supposed to see things coming, like 9/11, like terror attacks, like school shootings, like all the things that oh yeah, that person was on our radar, but we didn't see this coming. You never see anything coming. I love that. That's hilarious. Also, Vance points something out here that needs to be emphasized. Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing is going to be this Thursday in the Senate, and you're going to hear a lot of lies. And you're going to hear what Margaret Brennan just repeated from the National Review editorial board, which is she's cozied up to dictators like Vladimir Putin and Bashar Assad. I don't even want to argue the point right now about the details of whatever meetings she may have taken or whatever statements she may have made about Vladimir Putin or Bashar al-Assad. Irrelevant for a moment, because the bigger picture is this, and people forget this all the time. She was active duty United States Army. She's an officer in the United States Army in the reserves. Active duty, which means she holds a security clearance, regardless of, and she's a private citizen right now. She's not a member of Congress. I assure you, I mean, as bad as our military has gotten, sadly, in the leadership levels at the Pentagon, down boots on the ground type people are really solid individuals. They know their stuff. They know what they're doing. If there was an officer in the chain of command, I think she's a major, okay, so mid-level officer. If there's an officer in the chain of command in our military that is cozying up to dictators and in the back pocket of Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin, I assure you, she would be disciplined. She would be stripped of her rank. She would lose her clearance. She would be court-martialed. It's ridiculous, these allegations they're making against her. It makes no sense. One other quick clip here. This has to do with Pete Hegseth and what he'll do at the Pentagon.
Well, look, I think Pete is a disruptor, and a lot of people don't like that disruption. But Margaret, that disruption is incredibly necessary. If you think about all of those bipartisan massive votes, we have to ask ourselves, what did they get us? They got us a country where we fought many wars over the last 40 years, but haven't won a war about as long as I've been alive. They've got us a military with a major recruitment crisis, a procurement price crisis that's totally dysfunctional, where we buy airplanes for billions and billions of dollars, terrible cost overruns, the delivery dates are always delayed. So we need a big change. Now, admittedly, there are people who don't like that big change, but it is necessary, and it's explicitly what Donald J. Trump ran on. And I think part of the reason why the American people elected him their 47th president.
All right, that was just brilliant. Absolutely beautiful, and I loved every minute of it. Do you notice he keeps saying Donald J. Trump, Donald J. Trump? I think they focus group this, and they found that liberals hate it. Like Margaret Brennan, like people in the media, they hate pointing out the J part of the Donald J. Trump, because he just keeps doing it over and over again. And I think he just likes, with a grin on his face, he likes to twist the knife a bit. It was fantastic. It was the most brutal takedown of Margaret Brennan and the greatest performance of JD Vance I've seen since August, when we had this, no, it was September, this brutal takedown of Margaret Brennan and this brilliant performance by JD Vance. But at this time, it was during the vice presidential debate. I don't know if you remember this exchange, but Margaret Brennan was up to her tricks back then, even with the same smug, supercilious attitude.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to.
Oh, God, so annoying and smug. And did you notice that? Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. No, thank you for adding context and reality to this question. Also, check out Tim Walz's face on the split screen. God, did we dodge a bullet? That was only 4 months ago. Good God, what we've been through together. Also, one other thing in this interview, I don't know if you noticed something about Margaret Brennan during the interview. She's got, shall we say, a rather animated face with very expressive expressions. This is a montage put together by our buddy Kyle Becker. I used to work with Kyle years ago. He's a good guy. This is amazing. Look at the center one. It's like the worst nightmare version of the Brady Bunch you'll ever see in your life. What's going on with her? I think, you know what? I could be wrong. And if I am, I'm sorry. But if I'm right, who can blame her? I think she's got a crush. I think she likes herself a little JD. Well, Margaret, that's Mr. Vice President to you. And he's taken by his wife, Usha, and by all of us. He's our guy. Stand in line. Increased tariffs on our trade partners, tax cuts, regulation changes. Learn why gold is a viable diversification tactic now more than ever. Birch Gold, the only gold company I endorse, is releasing their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. To get your free copy along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold, text my name, Larry, Larry, to the number 989898. Here are the facts, okay? The national debt continues to increase. Our interest payments on that national debt continue to increase. Gold is still your hedge against a weakened dollar. And Birch Gold, well, it's still the company I recommend to help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. Did you get that? This is not new money that you have to like pay out of your pocket. This is money you already have sitting in an IRA or a 401k. They're going to convert that money into gold. No brainer, right? Text Larry to 989898. Get your free copy of the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, just information. Do that today. Thank you.